joined by Dr. Adwoa Danso. Thank you once again for joining us on the Health Dialogue. And today I'm also joined by Lyndon. Is it Wissart? It's Wissart. Sorry if I'm pronouncing
Wissart. That's right, Wissart, yeah.
Lyndon Wissart. Yeah, who was able to reverse his type 2 diabetes, which we're going to talk about today. So today we'll be looking at diabetes, and there are two types of diabetes, type 1 and type 2. But like I did said, I just want us to focus mainly on type 2 diabetes. And
Excellent.
From the research that I've done, type 2 diabetes is highly prevalent in the ethnic minorities than non-minority individuals. And I suppose there are multiple factors as to why that's happening. So Adwoa, I would like to come to you first. Before we go any further, would you like to explain the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes?
Yeah, so I think generally, well, as a whole, diabetes is to do with how sugar levels are being regulated within our bodies. Now, type 2 diabetes is more common because it's usually related to lifestyle choices. Yes, there's also a genetic factor as well. So with type 2 diabetes, you have insulin. So everybody has insulin in their bodies. And insulin is what is released to regulate sugar levels. So after we eat, everybody, whatever you eat, even if it's something small, you have a certain amount of insulin that's produced to kind of to help absorb the sugar in the body, help to bring the level down. When you have type 2 diabetes, because the sugar levels have been high and are constantly high for such a long time, the insulin doesn't actually work as effectively. It's not able to sense. It's like It's completely flooded with sugar. So it doesn't regulate the sugar level so well. So it can't bring that sugar level down because almost like the senses of the insulin become like desensitized because there's just so much sugar. It can't sense properly. So that's pretty much what type 2 diabetes is. So you don't have enough insulin, you don't have a good enough insulin response to bring the sugar level down because of persistent high sugar levels within the body.
I would like to come to Lyndon. Lyndon, what was your lifestyle, or should I say diet like, prior to being diagnosed?
Well, prior to being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, for example, my lifestyle, my breakfast, normal breakfast, was back then in the early days with like 3 slices of hard oat bread, which is a West Indian bread, and it's very sweet. I put butter on it, then I put jam on it. And if there wasn't enough jam on it, I'll put more jam on because I wanted to taste that jam. And then I'll have a latte, a coffee latte sachet. And in that sachet, you got processed, it's a processed milk in it. You got sugar in it already. Yeah. But I would put 3 to 4 teaspoons of brown sugar in it, then brown sugar, because it's supposed to be healthier for you. And then on top of that, I'd put honey in it. When it comes to lunchtime now, lunchtime is one of 2 things that are going to happen to us. You're going to have they're either going to feed you pasta, rice, potatoes. Yeah, okay, then you're going to have a fizzy drink with that. Yeah, if they don't feed you at work, you have to go out and get a takeaway. And a takeaway is going to be a quick meal, which is a pasta, rice, potato, or high carbohydrate meal. So this will be our lunch. After lunch, in the afternoon, we'll have a tea break, another tea break. And in the tea break, what you're going to do? You're going to have another cup of tea, you're going to have a coffee, and what do you have with it? You're going to have your biscuits or some more cakes, so you're going to eat it more. And on my way home now, driving my car, sometimes I could hear this noise in the boot of my car. Ching, 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 ching. I was like, what's that noise? What's that noise? And when I open the boot, I pull over, I open the boot, look in the boot, and I thought, oh man, my J2Os. So I used to have cases of J2Os in the boot because I was addicted to J2Os because I was never an alcoholic drinker. So when I went out with my friends for a meal or parties, I always drank J2O. And because I work in the catering industry, when you go to a cash and carry, you get J2Os cheaper. So when I was going to pubs or clubs, I paid £2.50 for a bottle of J2O. In the cash and carry, they got this big advert saying J2Os, a case for £5.50. I'm thinking to myself, a case of J2Os, £5. So I'll take a few cases. It makes natural sense. If you're addicted to a drink, it's your favorite drink at that time, you're going to buy it. So I used to have that in my car. So what I'll do, when I stop the car, I'd open it up. I get one bottle. For some reason, I don't know why, but I'll just open one bottle there and drink one there. It's like, oh, brilliant, refreshing drink. and then I'll take another bottle and put in the car with me for my journey home. But when you come home, like for me, I come home and say, listen, I don't want to eat no more because I've been eating all day. And you're going to say, so what's wrong with my food? Is there something wrong with my food? It's not poison, is it? And you spent all that time making it. So obviously we have to eat something. So I'd have to eat again, pasta, rice or potato. And on my table, I'll have my favorite drinks, my mango juice or my ginger beer. You know, so by the time you get back to the sofa, you're eating the biscuits and you finish the packet before you even know it, you know, with your tea. So this is what we sometimes go through on a day-to-day basis. So that was basically my lifestyle on a day-to-day basis. That's what I'll be eating. And because I'll be eating that amount of carbohydrates, sugar, this is why I became type 2 diabetic, you know. So the only reason why I say that is because a lot of us are eating like this on a day-to-day basis, but we don't realize it. And I only realized it when I started to write it down, when I started to write my book, and I started to write down a diary of what I was eating on a day-to-day basis. And then it became clear to me how I became type 2 diabetic.
Wow, so yours was literally 99% of your food contributed to it. So Adwoa, from what Lyndon have said, it all comes down to food. And Lyndon did mention the Caribbean is mainly carbs, but African homes, most 99% of our food are carbs. So it all comes down to food, Adwoa.
Yeah, I think it largely does. And thank you, Lyndon, for being so honest with what you're eating. I think I was smiling a lot because when I tend to see some of my patients who are either borderline or new diabetics, you know, it's not just, you know, people aren't honest about what they eat, and people tend to underestimate what they're eating. And, you know, Lyndon also mentioned that he didn't realise until he started writing it down. You don't realise some of the things that you're doing because we eat as we do a lot of things. So Lyndon mentioned he was not drinking when he was driving, but he'd have a JTO when he was driving. You know, he'd be watching TV and eating. There are lots of things that you don't and you wouldn't think about them as meals, and things like snacks and drinks. They carry a lot of sugar in. So it's really, really important, even as people that are well or non-diabetic, you know, anyone can be diabetic, right? So, and we are, as in our generation, more at risk as well because of the consumerism, because of what's available. We need to be really mindful of what we are eating and drinking as well. So yeah, and our communities, you know, the types of food that we eat are really high in carbohydrates, and that's because of the environments that we've come from, because of the types of work that we were doing back home. You know, you were doing a lot of manual labor for long hours. You needed substance to keep you going. But there aren't really many jobs here or work or even just, you know, your day-to-day that requires that amount of sugar to sustain yourself. So we've kind of evolved, but we haven't evolved, if you know what I mean.
Yes, yeah. I think we haven't evolved because of our mindset and because of what we're used to. Because we're used to certain foods and then we feed it to our next generation. We have to break that. We have to break that cycle. And there's nothing wrong with eating our foods, but we could cut it down in moderation.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about when I used to go to. Well, I still go to a lot of Ghanaian parties, and they serve your food for you. It's like this huge mountain of rice and this like tiny bit of meat, you know, one portion of chicken, a little bit, and you know, that's what people would expect. But it's, you kind of have to look at your plate completely different, and like Lyndon said, you have to change your mindset of how you view food. And actually people have relationships with food, and it, you know, Lyndon even described being addicted. Many people are addicted to things. People get into lots of different patterns. You know, even in primary school, we always used to have our main meal and a dessert. So I have formed this habit of every time I you know, I have a main meal, I really look forward to something
dessert, yes.
Dessert. And that's something that I know a lot of people have as well. But then that's not really an African thing, but that's a very British thing as well, I think, anyway, just looking back at primary school and growing up.
So it's like food. So what are the symptoms or signs for someone to go for checkup?
Yeah, I think everybody should routinely have a diabetic check, particularly anyone over the age of 40. Just get it done. It's really simple. It's a fasting blood test. But in terms of what to look out for, there's quite a spectrum of symptoms, but the most common one is feeling really thirsty.
Yeah.
Passing a lot of urine. It can start off usually at night time, but it's just you're going to the toilet a lot.
It could be the daytime. I was going to the toilet about 3-4 times an hour.
Yeah. So
I was my symptoms was crazy but I didn't know what the symptoms related to. I was overweight. Yeah, I was big. I had blurred vision at that time as well. And even with that time, I was working on the calculator and I couldn't work out 1 and 1 was 2, 2 and 2 is 5. It was very, very cognitive that I couldn't understand what was going on with my mind. Yeah. Also, as you're talking about always being thirsty, but always being thirsty, we never drink water. We always drank fizzy drink, your favorite drink to quench your thirst, And one of the worst things that I had is those pins and needles, numbness in my fingers and my toes, but I didn't know what it related to, feeling hungry all the time. That's another one. So you're always hungry and you're always eating. And that's another thing that got to me, because I enjoyed eating, but it just wouldn't stop, and always feeling tired as well. Tired is another one, but a lot of people feel tired, but don't realize why.
There are lots of different symptoms. So tired, feeling tired. You've mentioned some of them. There are other symptoms that I kind of want to draw people's attention to. So, I'm seeing a lot of people with sort of what we call secondary infections. So when your sugar levels are really poorly controlled, or you have diabetes and you don't know it, you can get infections. So you have to think about bacteria really like sugary environments. So where do you get sugary environments? Well, if you sweat, then you're producing more sweat, which attracts more bacteria. So I've had people that didn't know they were diabetic who came to see me because they kept getting boils in their armpits, boils in the sort of the groin area, as well as things like thrush, like especially for women. So when I see sort of women who keep getting thrush, I always ask, let's just do a sugar level check, diabetes check, just to make sure it's not that. It isn't always, but these are quite sensitive things as well. The other really common thing that I see in men is erectile problems or erectile dysfunction. So men will present with not able to maintain erection or have an erection, and they're sure it's something else, but sometimes it's actually related to sugar levels. So diabetes, again, I've had a couple of patients that I've diagnosed through that route. So there are lots of different symptoms, but I think between us we've covered most of the most common symptoms of diabetes.
When one is diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, what is next for them?
I think the first thing is to counsel them. So the first thing is to explain what it means. It's not a death sentence. I think in some cultures it's really taboo. People don't like to acknowledge that they have it. But I think the first thing to do is really explain what it means. I always say that if you take the advice, you try and maintain your sugar levels, you take the medication if it's what's needed, you can live a very normal life, because it's all about controlling your sugar levels. But it's a lifelong thing. It's not something that you can reverse in most cases, but I guess we'll come on to that later. So the first thing is explain the diagnosis, what it means. And I think I always try and explain that it's a lifestyle change. This is something that you have to maintain for life. You've got to change the way you eat. You have to change your relationship with food, and you have to change your relationship with exercise, or start exercising if you don't. So I've got many diabetics who are controlled with what we call diet. They're not on any medication, but they have completely changed their diet. They've increased how much exercise they're doing, and they've managed to naturally bring their sugar levels down, which is what I would like most of my patients to do. No one wants to be on medication. It's trying to do things naturally is always the best. But there are some people who have tried that, and for some reason it's just not bringing it down to a safe level. And it's really important that you try and bring the levels down, because you may not actually have any symptoms and you may not feel unwell, but having prolonged uncontrolled sugar levels, even though you feel well, is actually damaging your organs, and it damages the small vessels, really tiny vessels first. So the ones in the back of your eyes, the ones in your kidneys, also in your brain. So those are the ones that are first to, and also around your heart. Those are the ones the first to be damaged over a long period of time, which is why I think Lyndon mentioned blurred vision. But often, if you act early and you pick it up early, you can actually, and you maintain those levels, you shouldn't really have any problems with your kidneys, your eyes, and everything else. And in this country, the great thing is we have a screening program. So all diabetics, when you're diagnosed, are enrolled in a screening program to check the back of their eyes yearly for any early changes in the back of the eye.
So with you, Lyndon, with your experience or situation, what happened in your case? How did it affect you? What is the first step that you took?
Well, when I was diagnosed, the first step that I took was to cut down on my carbohydrates. That's number one. Because when I asked them, how did I become type 2 diabetic? And they said through carbohydrates, pasta, rice, potatoes, the drinks, the snacking, all those kind of things that I was eating. So for me, it was just a mindset of saying, okay, I need to cut down on all of these things, to reverse it. So from that day, the following day, I just cut down all the carbohydrates. I focus on certain foods. I cut out down my pasta, my rice, my potatoes. I stopped having all my fizzy drinks, and I just went on a regime now of physical activity to lose the weight. I went on to certain foods, flavonoid foods, more fruit and vegetable diet. I cut out meat at one stage. I stopped eating meat as well. I was intermittently fasting as well, so I can detox the body. But when I was intermittently fasting, I didn't realize I was intermittently fasting, but I was doing that about 4 or 5 times a week, 5-6 hours a day. So I was just drinking water. But once a month, I was having a 24-hour water fast because I wanted to make sure my blood sugar levels was low before I went for another blood test. So this is what my initial thoughts were: mindset, diet, physical activity, and intermittently fasting. So those are the 4 bases that when people ask me what did I do, that's what I implemented at that time.
And how long did it take you to reverse it?
Well, my HbA1c, the HbA1c is a blood sugar levels which they monitor you for the last 3 months. It's supposed to be 42, and mine was 92. They done a pinprick blood test on me when I take blood from my finger. That was 15.9, and that's supposed to be 5. And so when they done that, they gave me 3 weeks to reverse my blood test because I declined prescribed medication. So they said, okay, we'll give you enough blood tests in 3 weeks time. So within 3 weeks, 25 days, I went from 92 down to 77, my HbA1c, and then from 77 down to 60 in 28 days. And in the next month, I went down from 60 down to 41 HbA1c in a total of 105 days without prescribed medication. So that's how I done it.
Some people do not have the willpower to cut off some of the food, like Lyndon did, to be able to reverse his type 2 diabetes. But taking your medication, you'll be okay and have a normal life, isn't it?
Yeah, you would do, and I think, Lyndon, you've done exceptionally well to be able to do that. You're one of a very small number of people that have reversed their diabetes. It is possible, but it's very uncommon, if I'm being very honest. And I think with Lyndon is he made a drastic lifestyle change. He was able to identify. I mean, your diet was very sugar heavy, and I think you managed to maintain it as well. That's the other thing. You've managed to completely change your diet, which again is difficult. People don't have the willpower, and to kind of continue with these changes for a very long time.
I think some people in my situation, the reason why I think I focus on it, number one, I've never been sick before. I've never been sick. I've never been hospital for any medical stuff apart from when I dislocated my finger or when I'm visiting somebody in hospital. So when I found out that with diabetes, especially with the medication they want to give you, the side effects to the medication. So when my cousin told me the side effects with the medication, this is why I didn't take it. I didn't want anything else to go wrong with me because there was enough going wrong with me already. for the last year. I had pains in my stomach, I had blood in my stool, I went for a body scan, I had so many things going wrong with my body. And also, I'm self-employed as a chef. So if I'm self-employed and I don't work, I don't earn. So if I'm sick, I don't earn. It affects me, the family, and my surroundings and my lifestyle as well. And also, every 22 seconds, somebody loses a lower limb through diabetes. I didn't want to be one of those statistics. Every 6 seconds, somebody dies from diabetes, and I don't want to be one of those statistics. In the UK now, there's 4.5 million people with diabetes, and it's growing up. There's 400 plus, probably 450, 460 people worldwide with diabetes. And they're expecting that to go up in the next 10 years to about 550, 560. So I don't want to be one of those statistics where it's growing, and this is from the IDF, the International Diabetes Federation, that's their statistics. So I don't want to be one of the statistics. This is why I share my story and journey with people, that type 2 diabetes isn't a life sentence, it's an opportunity. So some people could read my story and have the foundation of say, okay, if he can do it, I know where somewhere I can try as well, because it's only what you put in your mouth. That's all it is. It's just the food that you put in your mouth with type 2.
Yeah. And also in terms of statistics, we're seeing younger and younger people.
Yes.
I've got children 13, 14.
Wow, 13, 14. I thought it started in the teens. Wow.
Yeah, and it's purely diet. Well, it's diet related. We've got such an obesity problem in our young.
Do they show? Sorry to cut you. Do they show some of the symptoms as well?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
They do. So, which is unfortunate, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and Adwoa, some people, it runs in their family. Yeah, how can one try not to actually? I know it all comes down to lifestyle, but when it runs in your family, does that mean you're more at risk of getting it?
Yeah. So you are definitely more at risk. So it means that you have to be even more mindful about what you're eating. And I used to always think, I'm too young. But I realized that I'm not too young. Like, my patients are younger than me and they have type 2 diabetes. So it's not like it's not necessarily an older person's disease. Like, we are of the age where we could be affected. So it's just trying to form good habits. And I definitely am somebody who's always had a sweet tooth, will always have one.
I think what I found for my personal self is that because I'm so strict on what I eat, 90% of the food that I eat are the healthy stuff, and the 10% or less than 10% are the so-called not healthy, but it's in moderation. Exactly. So also there are foods that we can eat that can help reduce the blood sugars naturally anyway. So if you're having these foods on a regular basis, it can help to control it. Definitely. It's just being mindful of what you're eating on a day-to-day basis. So I'm conscious every day. I fast nearly every day anyway. I don't eat I don't have a proper breakfast every day like I normally do. And there's things that I'm having that gives me energy. It's like when I stopped eating meat, like beef and lamb, gosh, that hurts, And I thought to myself, so where am I going to get my proteins from now? And I didn't, as a chef, you know about proteins, but you didn't realize there's so much proteins in green stuff like vegetables, like kale, spinach, avocado, all these wonderful foods, sweet potato. I become in love with sweet potato now. We take kale and we dry kale in the oven and we put a bit of olive oil on it and a bit of sea salt. Yeah, and then I make it crisp, and it's nice snacks. Even monkey nuts is a nice snack as well. Monkey nut is another food that people could have, which is good for you as well. For the body. There's so much things like blueberries as well. I love my blueberries, man. So yeah, I'm addicted to blueberries. So yeah.
So it all comes down to moderation and taking care of yourself. So Adwoa, how do you maintain it for someone that is type 2 diabetic, I should say?
I think in terms of looking at some of my patients that have done extremely well, it's like doing small things, like little and often. So I always say, I always ask them, what do you like? Okay, you like biscuits. Okay, so why don't you try and, rather than take away biscuits? Why don't you substitute it with something else? Or why don't you have like dried something else that has the same texture, or something else that has the, you know, the equivalent, like you said, kale crisps. Someone who likes crisps, that's a better example. Someone who loves, I don't know, cheese and onion crisps, why don't you make yourself some kale chips and like season them yourself with natural seasonings as well? So natural
that you like, yes.
Like, so like anchovies, for example, not everybody's cup of tea, but they are naturally have a natural, like a salty element in them.
Salt, yes.
Gives you the same kind of kick, right? So you've got to try and replace it with other things as well. So if you like cheese, for example, why don't you try and go with something that has the same texture, or like a low-fat cheese, or like a feta, or something you know, better than some of the other cheeses that exist. So I always try and go with things like that. So substituting different types of bread. Yeah. So why don't you have something
spelt bread, rye bread, like a sourdough as well? Because what I found with myself, I went on to wholemeal bread, and every time I ate on it made me feel bloated. Yeah, so I had to look for something. So I totally come off of white bread. So I went on to a granary bread, which is much better. And then I found seeded granary bread with like sesame seed, pumpkin seed, sunflower seeds. And I enjoy that so much more now. And it's a sourdough bread. So it's got natural raising agents in it, you know, which is so much more healthier for you, much better for you. And also one of the things that I found is that when I talk to a lot of people who want to reverse their diabetes, and they still want to eat their cakes, you know, and they still want to eat their biscuits, like you were saying, Adja. Yeah, what I said to them, okay, if you want to eat that biscuit so much, what you need to do for the next week, you don't have nothing, no biscuits, nothing. Yeah, do something to bring your blood sugars down. So at the end of the week, you can reward yourself in moderation.
Lastly, a lot have been said, so I wanted to hear your final thoughts for people who will be watching. Let's come to you, Adwoa.
I think my final thoughts would be that type 2 diabetes is definitely not the death sentence. It's not the be-all and all by any means. There are lots of things that you can do to help your situation, lots of things that your GP can also do to help your situation. I think it's also sensible to also not see it as like an older person's disease. I think we should all be proactive in making sure that we're aware of the symptoms and knowing how and when we should be getting tested. As I said, it's a really simple blood test that can be done at your GP surgery or via a GP surgery. So I would strongly recommend, particularly if you have a family history of diabetes, to get a check done.
Okay, sure, thank you. And Lyndon, what do you have to say finally?
My final thoughts is know what the symptoms are. Yeah, know what the symptoms are of type 2 diabetes, and remember 4 things that I implement: mindset, diet, physical activity, and intermittently fasting. These are the 4 things you need to focus on from my perspective, because it's a combination of things that you need to do to reverse your type 2 diabetes. And like it says on the front of my book, type 2 diabetes isn't a life sentence, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity. And that's what I offer through my book, an opportunity to reverse type 2 diabetes.
Thank you very much for taking time.
It's my pleasure.
Health Dialogue.